Greetings to all dear ladies and gentlemen from the ancients. To understand the reason why the feudal system could endure for thousands of years in ancient China, as well as the origins of the enslavement and suffering that span thousands of years, which the people had to bear, one cannot fail to mention the book Shang Jun Shu in feudal history. This book is considered the foremost forbidden text of the realm, banned from circulation among the common folk. However, in the hands of feudal emperors, it was a precious document, meticulously studied. This book does not contain overt attacks, but readers can clearly sense the author's wariness and contempt toward ordinary people. Although there are no venomous satirical remarks, after finishing it, the people still feel a chill, because the core ideology of the book portrays the nature of ordinary people like us as utterly worthless, viewing us as pawns that can be manipulated. Moreover, the book provides specific tactics for feudal emperors to control the populace. Thus, since the Qin dynasty, blind obedience and a slave-like mentality took root in the hearts of the people like a seed, nearly impossible to eradicate over centuries. Shang Jun Shu, also known as Shang Zi, is a synthesis of the legalist philosophies of Shang Yang. The central content of the book discusses the emperor's methods of governance. Shang Yang advocated that the way an emperor governs lies in weakening the people to strengthen the state. Shang Jun Shu asserts that the state and the people are two contradictory entities. When the people are strong, the state is weak, and conversely, for the state to be strong, the people must be weakened. If the state of Qin were to become powerful, the king of Qin needed to weaken the populace. So, what did Shang Yang propose the emperors should do? In Shang Jun Shu, he introduced tactics known as the art of controlling the people, which include three main principles: making the people ignorant, making the people weak, and making the people poor. Let us analyze each principle. The first principle, making the people ignorant. The goal is to render the people foolish, devoid of independent thought, only blindly following and working like production machines. According to Shang Jun Shu, the role of the people should be reduced to two primary duties. In times of peace, diligently farming to enrich the court. In times of war, wholeheartedly fighting enemies to defend the nation. Any behavior beyond these two duties is deemed superfluous. A prominent example in Shang Yang's philosophy is the story of erecting a log to establish trust. Shang Yang ordered a 3-zhang-long log to be placed at the southern gate of the capital and publicly declared that whoever could move the log to the northern gate would be rewarded with 50 taels of gold. At first, people did not believe that such a simple task could yield such a grand reward. Eventually, one person carried the log to the northern gate, and Shang Yang immediately rewarded that person with 50 taels of gold. This story, at first glance, seems to prove that the emperor's policies are always strictly enforced. But in reality, it aimed to ingrain in the people's minds that no matter how absurd the emperor's orders might be, they need not question or doubt, only obey. This was not about building trust, but about making the people blindly follow, without independent thinking, without considering whether the command was reasonable or not. Thus, erecting the log was not to establish trust, but to negate the people's rationality, forcing them to yield to blind obedience to the emperor's policies. It didn't stop there. Shang Yang also believed that the people must not have opinions about the emperor's policies. According to the records of Shang Yang in the historical records, when Shang Yang began his reforms and issued new laws, some said the laws were bad, while others said they were good. Shang Yang exiled all those who voiced opinions about the laws. Afterward, no one dared to comment on the emperor's policies anymore. This was precisely to teach the people that when the court issued decrees, the people had no right to object. Not only were they forbidden from criticizing, but they were not even allowed to praise. In the end, the people simply accepted all commands completely without any thought. The second principle, making the people weak. This principle refers to weakening the people's ability to resist, rendering them incapable of threatening the court. Absolute force would bring absolute submission. Due to the limitations of scientific and technological advancement at the time, the court's ability to rapidly expand its military strength was constrained. Therefore, the only way was to weaken the people's power. Shang Yang proposed strictly restricting the people's possession of weapons like iron and bronze. This idea was taken to its extreme by Qin Shi Huang. According to the annals of Qin Shi Huang, in the historical records. After unifying the 6 states, Qin Shi Huang confiscated and destroyed vast quantities of weapons across the land, melting them down into 12 golden statues. Each statue weighed 450,000 jin. The third principle, making the people poor. This is Shang Yang's final principle. He advocated that, beyond ensuring the people's minimal subsistence, the court must seize all their surplus wealth. The so-called, when the people are fed and warm, perverse thoughts arise, means that when the people are well-fed and comfortable, they develop wicked ideas. According to Shang Jun Shu, if the people no longer worry about food and clothing, not only do they lose the drive to strive, but they may also harbor deviant thoughts. Thus, in Shang Yang's reforms, the Qin state established a harsh and complex tax system. Just the 2 taxes, land tax and poll tax, accounted for 2/3 of annual income. According to the Book of Han, during the Qin dynasty, regardless of how much land the people actually owned, they were taxed based on the amount of land the court stipulated each person must have. Even when natural disasters struck, causing farmers' lands to fail, the amount of grain they had to submit could not be short by even a single jin. Besides the 2 fixed taxes, land tax and poll tax, there were also miscellaneous taxes, temporary levies based on the emperor's whims. For example, if the harvest was bountiful, the people had to contribute more to express gratitude for the emperor's benevolence. If natural disasters like droughts or plagues occurred, the people still had to pay additional taxes so the court could repair dikes and address the aftermath. In the Control Orders chapter of Shang Jun Shu, the core idea is encapsulated in 8 words. All people sow and plant. All trades are eradicated. Among the trades to be eradicated, commerce stood at the forefront. For instance, in his taxation measures, he heavily increased taxes on goods, making the tax on wine and meat 10 times their production value. This caused the commodity market to decline sharply, and even when transactions occurred, profits were meager. The Control Orders chapter also introduced the policy of abolishing perverse travel, meaning shutting down inns, banning travel, and prohibiting vagrancy among the populace. Additionally, Shang Yang implemented the One Mountain policy, which involved reclaiming natural resources like mountains, rivers, and lakes, turning them into state property and forbidding farmers from using them to make a living. The ultimate goal of making the people poor was to exhaust the people to their last breath. Since the people had been rendered ignorant and stripped of thought, they could not recognize the problem of their poverty. As long as they were still alive, they would not attempt any change, continuing to live in ignorance, following the path the emperor had laid out from generation to generation. The art of controlling the people also includes a 4th principle: exhausting the people, forcing them into servitude through backbreaking labor to drain their strength and health. After the Qin unified the 6 states, within a few short decades, they completed a series of monumental projects, employing an immense workforce. According to records, constructing the Great Wall mobilized 400,000 people, building the Apang Palace used over 700,000 people, and each project to construct waterways or roads could involve tens of thousands of laborers. This forced labor came without pay, and workers had to bring their own food and tools. Those conscripted were mostly young men, the primary labor force of their families. They could not farm their own lands, instead toiling for the emperor for years without compensation. The fortunate returned with bodies riddled with injuries, while the unfortunate perished early. The story of Meng Jiangnu weeping at the Great Wall recounts a tragedy from this era. Though it is merely a folktale, its enduring legacy proves it stemmed from widespread realities in society at the time. From this, we can see that the Qin's forced labor was exceedingly brutal. The final art of controlling the people is spiritual suppression. In modern terms, this could be called psychological manipulation, meaning the state used its formidable power apparatus to systematically oppress the people. According to regulations from Qin-era artifacts unearthed, when farmers worked in the fields, they were not allowed to look around carelessly. Their ears could not listen freely, and their mouths could not speak idly, akin to blindfolded donkeys pulling a millstone. The people were treated like livestock. If a farmer's buffalo worked too efficiently, the family could face severe punishment. In extreme cases, execution by dismemberment. In lighter cases, expulsion from their land. Shang Jun Shu advocated the complete eradication of personal space, creating a transparent society where everyone was under the tight surveillance of the state and their neighbors. Shang Yang established a household registry system, forcing the people to monitor each other and report wrongdoers for generous rewards. If they failed to report, they faced harsh penalties. Within a group of 10 households, if one person committed a crime, the others would be held collectively accountable. In wartime, if someone lacked valor in battle, not only would that person be executed, but their parents, siblings, and wife and children would also suffer consequences. In Shang Jun Shu, nearly 10 chapters suggest that husbands and wives, as well as friends, must not be close, must not shield each other out of affection. The people were forbidden from protecting one another. Even spouses and friends had to denounce each other without letting emotions interfere. This was an utterly authoritarian regime, where no one had secrets before the state or those around them. It was a truly terrifying scene. The emperor sat on the dragon throne like a spider, reigning over the center of a web of power. Every tiniest piece of information in this network would be swiftly seized by him. Furthermore, Shang Jun Shu addressed the elimination of all forms of enjoyment, such as music, dance, and fine jewelry. It was best to restrict everything. The goal was to turn people into tools. What was the ultimate purpose of this? Shang Jun Shu emphasized weakening the people, erasing their personal space, and making them wholly dependent on the court. He reasoned that if the people were wealthy or free, they would no longer respect or fear the court. Conversely, when the people were impoverished, they would rely on and revere officials, leading them to grovel and obey the court blindly. This created a hierarchical society where the common folk could only kneel before the ruling class. Shang Yang's ideology is truly frightening when it views people as mere tools to serve the state, treating them as pawns to be controlled and manipulated entirely. Zhuangzi once said in the chapter Horses' Hooves that humans are like horses, with a strong and resilient nature of freedom. Zhuangzi always strove to protect personal space and individual life. Yet, in stark contrast, Shang Yang spared no effort to obliterate personal space, turning people into tools lesser than livestock. We cannot help but ask, what was Shang Yang's ultimate goal in proposing these ideas? In the Persuading the People chapter of Shang Jun Shu, there is a passage stating that if benevolent policies are used, the people will be close to their kin. If harsh policies are used, the people will be close to the court. Shang Yang believed that if good policies were employed to govern, the people would grow attached to their families and distance themselves from the court. Conversely, when harsh policies were applied, the people would depend on the court. This reveals that Shang Yang believed benevolent governance could not be used to rule the people, for it would make them loyal only to their families and estranged from the court. Shang Yang believed that the people's happiness and the nation's prosperity were at odds with each other. Thus, to achieve a powerful state, he had to weaken the people. When the people were weakened, the state could control them more easily. In modern terms, this can be understood as a form of emotional manipulation. A simple example. Someone stands calmly on the shore, another pushes him into the water. When the drowning person cries for help, the pusher pulls him up. From then on, the rescued feels indebted and becomes a mental slave, Bugan Fan Kong. In today's workplaces or families, emotional manipulation is also common. For instance, in jobs, bonuses and wages money you rightfully deserve are withheld, then given as rewards, ensuring you Bugan resign, Bugan err, Bugan slack off. That's the intent. In families, emotional manipulation is even more prevalent. Some parents often say, "We've toiled to raise you. Everything we do is for you. Why don't you obey? Why do you argue?" In truth, parents bring children into this challenging world without their consent, merely to continue their lineage. Yet, a child's presence also brings much joy to parents. Understanding parents see raising children as a duty and responsibility, not a favor or gift bestowed upon them, nor do they expect repayment. Reality shows that if parents act responsibly, children grow up healthy and grateful. Conversely, if parents view raising children as granting a favor and expect huibao, children often become rebellious. The theory of Shang Jun Shu is like pushing all the people into the water, then occasionally tossing them scraps of food. Over time, Those receiving food grow grateful and forget how it felt to stand on the shore. They even claim they once stood there, believing they were born to live in the water. For these people, as long as you occasionally provide food, they'll feel content, no longer dreaming of returning to the shore. In truth, Shang Jun Shu understood that a thriving nation wasn't about protecting the people, but about defeating other states. Shang Yang believed only in military might. To him, a strong nation meant superior military power. The goal of a strong nation was to build a fully centralized society, where social structures were vertically aligned and social life became monotonous, all controlled by an absolute center. The feudal system regarded the governance philosophy of Shang Jun Shu as a model, employing it unchanged for over 2,000 years. Partly because this method of rule was low cost. Satisfying the ever-growing needs of people is difficult, but reducing those needs is far easier. In feudal society, labor productivity was low, and technology couldn't keep up with rising human demands. Meanwhile, feudal emperors had no desire for technological progress. During the Tang and Song dynasties, imperial exams included subjects like medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. But by the Ming and Qing, exams were tightly restricted to the 5 classics and dead texts. Technological advancement, tied to productivity gains, clashed with the autocracy of feudal emperors, something they could not tolerate. Thus, any sign of progress was snuffed out. So, who ultimately benefited from Shang Yang's ideology? Was it the nation's prosperity under Shang Yang's rule, or the feudal emperors? Initially, Shang Yang tried to persuade Duke Xiao of Qin through 2 meetings, but failed. By the 3rd, they began to understand each other, and by the 4th, Duke Xiao felt he'd found a kindred spirit. At first, Shang Yang used theories of kingly virtue to convince Duke Xiao, but the Duke cared little for virtue, only wanting techniques, ways to make the state rich and the army strong. During their discussions, Shang Yang proposed that to enrich the state and bolster the military, all societal resources must be monopolized and controlled absolutely by the Qin king. This view perfectly aligned with the king's thinking. Using the state machinery to force the people's collective will toward the goal of a strong nation maximized control and allocation of social resources. Francis Fukuyama, in his book, The Origins of Political Order, also addressed this. Estimates suggest Qin's military successfully mobilized 8 to 20% of the nation's population, while ancient Rome's republic managed only 1%, the Greek alliance 5.2%, and early European states even less. So, what did Shang Yang's reforms in Shang Jun Shu achieve? Those familiar with history know Shang Yang was torn apart by chariots due to the nobility's suspicion and King Huiwen of Qin. Yet, though Shang Yang failed, his policies brought success to Qin. Ultimately, Qin annihilated the 6 feudal states and unified the realm. But was Qin's unification truly a triumph for its people? What did they gain? It was collective punishment, harsh penalties, imprisonment for entire families, enslavement if they didn't fight. So who really won? Only the Qin royal clan, only the Qin king. After Qin Ershi ascended the throne, he killed 12 princes in Xianyang and had 10 princesses torn apart by chariots in Du County. Prince Gao Wei Bao voluntarily died with his wife. In the end, the Qin emperor wiped out nearly all his kin. But was Qin Ershi the sole victor? If we'd waited just 2 more years, Qin Ershi would be killed by Zhao Gao. Then Zhao Gao was slain by Ying Ying. But Ying Ying ruled for 46 days before Xiang Yu arrived, and Ying Ying was killed too. The final outcome of Shang Yang's ideology was that everyone lost. Why? Shang Yang turned Qin into a mighty state, but Shang Jun Shu revered only strength, not civilization. Qin became the first autocratic feudal dynasty in Chinese history, ending the prior fragmented feudal order. Shang Yang's goal was to make Qin a war state. In his eyes, the people were mere cannon fodder in a wild, powerful nation's battles. Shang Yang's indifference to the people's lives foreshadowed his own fate, and that of Qin. After maturing and growing under this ideology, Shang Jun Shu never cared for the people's happiness, only pursuing national might. And this led to the downfall of the entire Qin dynasty. So, what is a truly strong nation? A weak people and a strong state, or a strong people and a strong state? Fortunately, we, the posterity, have witnessed all this. But have we truly understood? In modern society, are there nations still repeating this mistake? We can look back at the past, but let us never return to that path.